Able to see my screen? All right. All right, so let's start. So, how open source changed my life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my session. I'm Kamal. I'm a Google developer expert in Dart, Flutter, a YouTuber, and a mentor. And today's session is not about like the usual session where I keep talking or endorsing about a technology or project. It's purely about how open source really changed my life, how I was so hesitant to adopt its technology, or how when I started open source, what are the things I was so naive in starting it, and what are the challenges that I faced, and what are the current open source projects that I'm currently working on, and how companies are adopting open source uh, these days, and it's become as one of the criteria for recruiting a person, and how important it is to know how to contribute to open source and where to contribute or how to start and how to start your journey with it. So I believe in this tagline which says managing an open source project requires different demands and leadership. And it's very true. And it completely changed my overall perception and my working style towards open source project. I think if it is managed in a right way, that is the open source, I think it can deliver an industrial strength system that meets user requirements, needs, and provides solution. Now, these open source solutions are so fully extendable, maintainable over a long period of time. And the resulting code is much more consistent, easier to manifest. And this is purely out of my experience that I'm saying this. And in my later slides, you'll get to know how this really is the line that works for me and how it's being used in my day-to-day life. So let's see what was my working model prior to open source. So I was working in all of the big firms, and my style of working was enterprise, a very close project. In fact, I was quite content with what I was working because enterprise also has few pros and cons. They follow a very strict guidelines, rules in a very organized way. They deal things in a very organized way. They follow design documents, then the coding, and then the testing. So they follow this usual procedure. They avoid taking risk as much as possible in the closed project. They go with approvals, they go with rules, protocols, and finally, the information is all private. Very less amount of information is kind of exposed. Yeah, it worked out well in the initial period for me. And also, there are some good points also about a closed project or an enterprise where you have a very good support system, a user friendliness, and a unified experience. And I was pretty happy with this working style, and it went almost for a decade. And that's when I really started feeling okay, no, there's something really wrong. And I'm not able to get the creative side of mine. So working in an enterprise project was absolutely fine. But then when you start working on a particular feature, you feel constrained and you're not that flexible or you cannot modify any feature. You have to accept the way it is. And if I had to do something, I had to have so much approvals and a long process to go on. The licensing used to come in between. The pricing makes it really feel bad. Oh, I'm not able to get anything more than this. So this was kind of pulling and did not allow to expose my creative side. So that's when I said, okay, let's really see what this open source is all about. And okay, that time it wasn't a trend. So I said, okay, let's have a look into it and do it. So whenever I do or learn a new technology or dive into a tool, I see what was prior to it and when did it really started. So that's when I started dwelling into this open source part, and I found that it started way back in 1950. It was not in 2010 or 2012. So in 1950, we had the software and compilers, which was delivered as a part of the hardware purchase without separate fees. And then in 1970s, we had IBM software. And in 1980, we had Richard, launching the GNU project. And in 1990, we had the first version of Linux. Mozilla was introduced. And then 2007, in 2007 period, we had Apache. We had developed and maintained an open source community. We had MySQL. We had PHP installed in almost 2,400 change million websites. I don't know the exact numbers of it. And then we had 2.1 million web servers. We have WordPress. You name about the tools that you use on a daily day basis, like WordPress, VLC Player, Notepad++, Ubuntu, Android, Flutter, and the list keeps going on, and everything is open sourced. So after looking into this, I said, okay, I think it's time that we come out of that nutshell and start working on open source project. And then I started looking into some of the survey results, and really it was surprising to me. We see that these days, whenever you apply for a job, the organization quickly asks, okay, can I get your GitHub account? Can I know what kind of open source projects have you worked? If you're from an Android background, they ask, have you worked on any of the open source libraries? Have you contributed? Now, why is this trend changing? Now, that's because companies are easily adopting open source. And it's also been cited that 40% of the organization are used to open source, and half of the policies are getting changed, saying that, okay, have you contributed to open source? So that's the kind of, that's the rate at which companies or startups or mid-sized companies are adopting open source. And if you haven't started one, at least give it a try and see how it works. And in my upcoming slides, I'll let you know the points that how you can start or where you need to look for it and what are the basic criterias that you need to look for when you actually start working on an open source project. For me, the definition of open source lies inside these three factors. So first is letting your creative side out and being very flexible enough so that you can perform all kinds of tweak, change, modifications, and in turn building an awesome community. So at the end of the day, it's revolving around these three factors. So if someone has something interesting to add to this, definitely I would love to know about it. So creativity, flexible, and community is something that I'm looking for in an open source, and I'm able to achieve that also. When I started open source, I had this preconceived notion that open source is free. Let me tell you, it's not free. I feel free is in terms of freedom and not in terms of price, because you get to explore it, work on it, and see what changes you can bring to that project or to the community. And it's also adaptive. It's got a lot of customizations. It's easier to evaluate freedom and flexibility, as I mentioned, and the community. So open source project, if you see, as per the Octoverse, it's one of the kind of a reporting tool by GitHub. They kind of give you the latest yearly tool or yearly report saying which are the technologies kind of being the top contributors or how it's impacted. Do we have only developers kind of contributing? No, we have program managers, we have testers, we have entrepreneurs, we have designers. All kinds of diverse fields are contributing. It's just not developers. And it also gives that community driven factor. So why should I contribute to an open source? What am I going to get from it? Are they going to pay me, or at the end of the day is my product being going to launched, or it's going to be bought by any of the companies? No, it's the kind of satisfaction, and it's kind of the credit that you get in building up this community, and you have people from all over the world helping you do this, is one of the wow factor that I would say when you actually try working on an open source community. So if you really ask about my journey, I started in all phases, all zone, all technology, starting from web, mobile, and now I'm purely focusing on community building. So I've used my experience of my web, mobile, and now I'm into community building. That's how my journey goes into building one. So if you ask me, open source, it's just not one language. You have tons of language. It's just not Android or Flutter or React or any of the operating systems. You have Python, C++, Ruby, Swift, and there's so many more languages to learn. If you're very new, you can try any of the languages, get your basics right, oops concept, and you're good to go to pick any language. That is what I would say. So just don't go with the trending one. If you're comfortable with any of the languages, just pick it up. So you might ask me, okay, Kamal, okay, I got to know, okay, open source is kind of trending now and people are started contributing. Now, where do I start? So I would suggest that get into GitHub, create an account, start finding what are the popular languages in GitHub. Every day we have the top contributors, top languages being forked, pull, I mean, kind of pull request, merged, and also just try to look at the most popular languages. Then try to find the type of products. Try to find the kind of projects. It could be security, it could be virtual reality, or it could be a simple text editor that you could work on it that interests you. And also volume. Don't pick a very complex project. Look for projects that are labeled as first timers or easy for beginners. So you just get the taste of it and then start getting your hands dirty with the complex one. Because if you start working on a VLC player project, definitely you will not know. And the people who try to review your code might be quite strict, and you don't know the technologies or the terms used while reviewing or committing the code. So, first get used to the tags, get used to how to push your code to the proper branch, and see if you have someone who could help you with this if you're a newcomer. If you've already been doing it, you can definitely improvise on it. So these are the basic criteria that I would start if I was very new to open source. And then what to learn? I would say there are three things, in fact: GitHub and community. GitHub, learn the basics of Git, see how you can work with the community. That is something a lot of people miss in these days. If you're good at coding and you don't have the empathy, or if you don't have proper way of communicating with people, then it's not going to serve the purpose. Accept feedback, take that as a motivation, take that as an improvisation, and take it, because I see a lot of people fighting over or arguing or taking the discussions on a wrong side when you try to give them a feedback, if your code is not kind of not working or up to the standards as per the project. So try to build that community by building a good rapport with them. Try to work out with them offline, send them an email asking, okay, these are the rules, I'm very new to it. So that way you build this community, talk to people. And then definitely you need to know a few basics of Git, which you can find it on the official site of the GitHub. So I know where to start, I know what to learn, then what to do next. I would say it's not always about fixing bugs or pull request. There's something more than that as well. If you're really good at writing articles, go ahead with the documentation, because documentation is the first phase or the front phase of your entire project. Because even if I'm going to contribute to a project, I'm going to look into the README file, understand what this project is, how do I commit, what is the code of conduct, what are the contribution guidelines, and if there's someone who could really write all this in a proper narrative way, definitely you can even contribute to documentation. And then clean code. I'm not talking about removing the content or something, comments on a code. I'm talking about, say, if there is a functionality which is kind of creating a lot of um, extra memory space, or it kinds of looping unnecessary time, or if you have some objects which are kind of leaking or something like that, if you could clean up those kind of code, you are a huge lifesaver for those projects. Trust me, there are a lot of people who are really working on this. Or if you have something that you would like to add as a new feature, feel free to add it. Someone would be there to comment and say, okay, you know what, this feature already exists. If you'd like to contribute to it, you're welcome to do it. And they would give you an issue number. So nobody's going to say, no, we don't want your feature. We already have more features. No. So the community is really welcoming. Open any of the projects, look for issues open or closed, or bugs or feature request tags, click on them, and then you can start exploring it. It's entirely a different world if you get into GitHub or any of the repositories that you know. So these are ways that you could actually contribute. Or if you don't find any of this falling under your category, create your own open source project. Start working on something where you have an idea and you can start building on it. So After that, there are many companies. Say, for example, how really open source starts is, say, for example, you're working on this tool which is used by a software and it is a paid version. Look for features that are used by users very frequently. And if that feature can be built for free and with a modified, better version of it, that itself plays another open source project for you. So look for any of the products that you're using on a day to day life and see if you can come up with an open source project. So that's how you do it. So you can pick an existing project, or you can look for a commercial product, which as I mentioned, or you can create your own open source project. So that's how my journey started into Flutter. So Flutter being one of the Google's UI toolkit for building this beautiful natively compiled applications for mobile web desktop from a single code base. Let me repeat that, it's from a single code base. And I just fell in love with it the moment I tried Flutter. And it is free, open source. And recently we had a week or 2 week back, we had Flutter 2 launched. And the launch of Flutter 2 was that you could use the same code base to ship your native apps on 5 operating systems. Yes, I did mention it's 5 operating systems, which is Android, Windows, Macs, Linux. You name them, you get it. And also on the web experience, targeting browsers like Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Edge. So Flutter can be embedded in cars, TV, smartphones, appliances, home appliances, and it provides the most pervasive and portable experience for an ambient computing world. So this was my first open source that I really tried and got too much into it, and that's how my journey started because everything in Flutter is open source. Now we have something called pub.dev, and it's kind of an aggregation or pool of libraries which is purely built by community, by the community, and for the community. So you can find here all kinds of library, and we have these libraries are open source. So if you want to know how this library was built, click on the link, and if you look at the right corner, you have something called GitHub issues. Click on it, the entire code is available to you. You can fork it, play around with it, in fact, add more features to it, or if you find a bug, or everything is open source, so transparent that this is how open source projects are built and it's so successful. So nothing is hidden here. It's built by Google employees also. It is built by community people like me and you as well. So that's how transparent Flutter is. So try your hands using these libraries. And if you'd like to know more about Flutter, you have flutter.dev website. You can find out more details about it, or you can reach out to me on my any of my Slack handles or Twitter handles, and I'll let you know more about Flutter. So these are one such cool UI that is built by the community. So this is not something that it's been created by Google, or and it's not been out open sourced. It's a tool called Flare where you can create this beautiful animation, and even that tool is open source. So there's nothing like hidden in Flutter. The tools are open source, libraries are open source, the SDK is open source. So everything is so open and transparent, and you can start working and you can start it directly. In fact, if you want this dragon, you can go to this repository, fork it, and start playing around with, and you can create different characters in it. And the another one where it was kind of an e-commerce app which was developed by one of my friend, and that's also the cool animations that you can build using Flutter, and all this are built using Flutter. And the first one is using the tool called Flare. And we have another tool by Flutter, which is called the Dartpad, which is an open browser tool. So you don't, if you have to do, or if you have to work on Flutter, you don't need an IDE. You have an online browser IDE, just open Dartpad and you get the IDE, and this code is available directly. You can start modifying it and run it on the browser itself so that you can get this beautiful result. So if you look at it, it's all simple with boxes and circle, and the animation effect that it gives you is what makes Flutter really different. Okay, we have a couple of more libraries usage here. So you remember I had spoke about pub.dev. Now these packages are available. Say for example, if I had to build this bottom navigation bar, think about the time that I have to spend to build something like this, and upon that I have to create a lot of animations. So all this is pre-built for me. All I have to do is just take the package name and I'm good to go. I can start using it. Or if you look at this bear UI, it's very interesting. As and when you type, the bear keeps looking at your screen, or the cursor basically. So this has also been open sourced. So if you want to change the avatar to something else, and instead of a login box, you want to give a pop-up, definitely you can do it. So that's how Flutter is open source, and that's how it helps you to get your creative side out. So I think Flutter, more than the technology, it's all about the community also. So community also plays a very important role in an open source life. So if I have to know about Flutter, it's just not Google. It's about community and how people are actually interacting inside this community. So if I have to talk about Twitter, yes, we have a lot of updates happening on Twitter. GitHub, the entire repo is available on GitHub. Meetup, we have events happening all over the places. Slack, yes, we have a Slack channel exclusively for Flutter. If you want to get invited into it, just let me know. I'll send you an invite. Medium, we have tons of article posted by Google employees as well as non-employees and community people also. Discord, yes, we do have. Reddit, any tech-related queries are posted on Reddit. Stack Overflow, tons of queries have been answered. YouTube channel, we have the official Google employees and the non-YouTubers, I mean YouTubers posting videos related to Flutter. So you can find ways to get connected to Flutter. In case if you have any issues, you're not left alone. You can get connected in any of these medium. And there is also another thing called Flutterstar, which is if you identify as a woman or a non binary, and if you have an interest towards Flutter, you can join this community. It's been run by two amazing women, Danielle and Stephanie. So if you would like to join this, where we have a regular monthly meetups, we talk about projects, we talk about the job openings in Flutter, any events for talk, or if you have to conduct an event and you want speakers, everything you have there happening. And we also have a Flutterstar first conference happening in the month of April. So if you'd like to join this event, I'll give you a link in the references section, or you can just ping me on any of the social media. I'll give you a link to this event and you're welcome to join. And it's the first event of Flutterstar, which is going to be launched and covering all time zones from the Pacific to the Australian side. So really excited for that, and it's another conference. Please do join this conference. Yeah, so Flutter journey started and it is still continuing. And also, this is another project that I'm currently working, which is called the Application Engineering Library Group. And this library or this community is basically focused in building reusable application components, which kind of covers all the platforms like Android, iOS, and HMOS. Yes, I did talk about HMOS, which is the Harmony OS, which is the operating system from Huawei, and it is designed for smart devices such as TV, and it is being used as a mobile operating system. So build a library which actually supports various fields also, ranging from health, IM or media, music, news, and many more. So we are targeting the UI UX design to deployment reusability at each stage. Thus, we are kind of minimizing the R&D effort to build an innovative solution in a popular middleware platform. So we are kind of focusing on all the reusable components here. And this is also similar to Flutter, where it is purely open source, open to the community. If you want to contribute on any of the libraries, you're welcome to do it and you can work on it. And I think our vision speaks our work, and it is process and the process involved in building the first free open source community. So this is the vision. So you can see that what we exactly do. And then, if I have to talk about this reusable component architecture, it's all about the functional definition, finding the definition. Say, if it could be a login module, what are the different ways? It could be OTP, it could be your Gmail, or it could be your Facebook. Different types of logins are available. And then we look for the multiple layout templates, choose one, and then we kind of go with the configuration part all in one section itself, this is happening. So that's about the open source project that I'm working. And if you want to connect to this library group, we have all ways to connect. As I mentioned, community plays a very important role in this open source project. And if you don't have a community driving force, your open source project just remains a project and not open to the community. And then finally, yeah, that's it for the session. So I think open source is the future, and a lot of companies are adopting it, and it is the future architecture. So if you haven't started working on an open source project, I would suggest give it a try, get into GitHub or any of the repository controls, see how projects are working, what kind of standards they follow, and see if you could get any of the creative side of yours out on this and see what wonders you can come out of it. And you can follow me on all these channel. And if you have any questions related to Flutter or the AppLab group, or in general, you can drop me an um, query in any of these groups. And yes, I'm done. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I'm good to take it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was such a fantastic presentation. We did have 2 questions come in during it, and then everyone else is free to submit their questions now. First, would you speak to your transition into community building? What are your suggestions for career changers familiar with tech and programming, but without direct professional experience as an engineer?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. In fact, I get these days because if you're already in tech, you know the clear path or you would have someone helping. So in that case, what I would suggest is get to talk to a mentor or get to talk to someone who's an open source contributor. Spend at least a one-on-one session, like 15 to 20 minutes, have a talk with them, let them know what's your background and what is your next at least 1 to 2 year goals. Talk to them, and then because I cannot give you a direct solution for it, everybody's vision, everybody's working style, background totally varies. So there might be one person who really is not into programming, there might be someone who at least knows the basic. So my way of mentoring or giving a direction to a person depends on his background, his ability, how much time he can really dedicate or he she can dedicate. Depending on that, I would really go for a suggestion. But my thing would be is talk to a mentor or to an open source contributors or to someone who's into a tech person. Talk to them, spend some time, understand what is the field that they're looking for, and then look for conclusions or answer to this.
Second question, I would love to get started on open source, but it would be nice
Mhm.
if someone helped me out initially. How and where can I find people who are willing to walk me through it?
Okay, so first thing, you can go to the open source top contributors. Okay, you would find ton of them. That is one way of finding. You can get into Mentorcruise. There is this mentorship program where people are open source contributors. That way you can find out. Another one is on Twitter. Find open source communities, and you have ton of people being followed and followers. So if you try to get into them and see, there are open source contributors. They tag themselves as OSS, open source contributors, and also you have GitHub stars. These are the people who are been working in this open source world day in and day out and kind of working on this. And there's another foundation called Soda Foundation, SODA, Soda Foundation. They are into open source completely. So if you try looking for resources like this, you'll definitely find someone who can really help you to walk you through what exactly your journey should be or where you can start and what you could do with it.
Erica asked in the chat if you could provide the links to the Slack and YouTube if possible.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to send those to me and I can go ahead and share them in our Slack for
Sure,
because I can.
definitely will do that, Sierra. Or if you
Perfect.
want, I can ping you on.
Yeah. Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay. Oh, one more popped up. Should one learn Dart first or dive directly into Flutter?
Okay, so this is a very good question, I would say, because Dart being the language for Flutter, so there are two ways I would say. If you're good at I wouldn't say good at programming. If you know programming, say if you're from a C++, Java, Android background, then I would say you can just spend 2 or 3 days on Dart just to understand the syntax, and you can directly dive into Flutter. That is one thing. But if you're really very new to programming language and you want to start directly on Flutter, then I would suggest try at least a week on OOPS concept first, object oriented programming. Understand what is MVP, understand what is testing, how does it plays a very important role. Spend at least a month on this basic concept, and then learning Dart, or for the matter any other language, is going to be perfectly easy for you. That is my suggestion.
Do you see any negative side about Flutter development being dependent on so many third-party libraries for many of the functionalities? If so, how do you overcome those issues as a developer?
Yes, if I say every technology or every product has the pros and cons. So, but compared to other technologies, I've seen Flutter kind of overcoming a lot of things and growing in this shorter span. I feel it really happy. Now, coming to the question, like it depends on so many third party libraries. Yes, it is a kind of a drawback. But when it comes to at the end of the day, when it comes to the user delightment or customer service, I think using the parties and the support that we get in case if we are stuck with it kind of covers it up. So that way, I don't feel using them is a harm. And that's how I deal with it. So if you feel the third party libraries are kind of overwhelming, then I would suggest go ahead, build one. That is how you start open source. Go ahead and do it one for yourself.
I feel like that's a really common feeling from native developers. Is I just saw it in our work Slack. I try never to use third parties unless I absolutely have to. So
Yeah.
that is
If
a
unless I
difference.
want to build something really fancy animation, I don't want to sit because that's not my genre or my area of focus. It will be more on functionality side. So I have something already built on the animation part. I directly use them unless I really want to get into animation or something.
Yeah. With that, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about the Flutterista conference. That sounds
Yeah.
really great. So I'm definitely going to look into that.
Yeah, I'm going to send you all the links to all the
Perfect.
Flutterista, everything. So Sierra will forward it to you, or I can put it on this message and you can find it, or you can just type Flutterista and you will get all the details.
So thank you so much for being here, sharing your expertise and experience in open source. Thank you for all our attendees for joining us on Friday. And we hope to see everyone at our next event on Monday.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for the time and thank you. Bye.
Bye.